The blinking cursor on the screen was Anya Sharma's metronome, a steady pulse in the quiet symphony of her apartment. Outside, the Seattle rain painted shimmering, abstract streaks on her window, but inside, her world was one of crystalline logic. Lines of code flowed from her fingertips, elegant and efficient, each a perfectly crafted solution to a miniature puzzle. This was her sanctuary, the place where the nagging sense of being overlooked, a feeling that clung to her like the city's damp air, dissipated. Here in the clean, unambiguous world of syntax and semantics, her work spoke for itself. Her day job was a purgatory of beige cubicles at a mid-tier data analytics firm called Synapse Solutions. And she was good at it, of course. Her code was clean, her bug fixes swift. But her contributions were absorbed into the corporate whole, her name just one in a list on a project commit log. Her manager, a man named Dave who wore polo shirts a size too small, would often present her work as a team effort in meetings, his voice booming while Anya shrank into her chair. She didn't have the personality for self-promotion, the easy charm that translated into visibility. So she saved her real passion for the nights and weekends. That passion was the open-source community. It was a global, decentralized collective of builders and tinkerers who believed that software like knowledge should be shared and improved upon by all. Years ago, during a particularly frustrating project involving asynchronous operations, she had devised a beautifully simple solution. It was a semaphore for JavaScript, a way to control access to a limited number of resources, preventing system overloads. It was tiny, barely 30 lines of code, but it was perfect. She had named it a sync semaphore. JS wrapped it in a GNU General Public License version 3 GPLv3 and pushed it to a public repository. The GPLv3 license was her favorite part. It was a copyleft license, a clever piece of legal jujitsu that ensured her work would always remain free. Anyone could use it, modify it, build upon it. But there was one critical, unbendable rule. If you used her code in your software in its entirety must also be made open source under the same license. It was her small way of contributing to the digital commons, of ensuring that corporations couldn't simply take and profit without giving back. She checked on it occasionally, watching with a quiet pride as her little tool was forked and starred by other developers, integrated into small projects across the globe. Then she'd forget about it for months at a time. It was a Tuesday when the world shifted. OmniCorp, the undisputed titan of the tech industry, had just launched Aether, a revolutionary cloud platform that promised to seamlessly integrate every aspect of a user's digital life. It was valued almost overnight at $10 billion. The tech world was abuzz. Out of professional curiosity, Anya decided to put it through its paces. She was impressed. The platform was impossibly fast, handling thousands of simultaneous data requests without a hiccup. It was too fast. There was an uncanny efficiency in the way it managed concurrent processes, a signature she felt deep in her bones. It felt familiar. A thread of suspicion began to unravel in her mind. She opened her browser's developer tools, her fingers flying across the keyboard, peeling back the layers of minified and obfuscated code that made up Aether's front end. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on a vast beach. But Anya knew the shape of that grain. She wasn't looking for the whole file, just its ghost, its behavioral fingerprint. And then she saw it. Buried deep within Aether's core scheduling module, a tiny, elegant piece of logic that handled resource queuing with an unmistakable grace. It was her semaphore. Her async semaphore JS. It had been renamed, its comments stripped, its variables obfuscated, but its soul was intact. Her 30 lines of code were the silent, uncredited workhorse at the heart of a $10 billion machine. A cold knot formed in her stomach. It wasn't about money. It was about the principle. It was about the license. OmniCorp was using her GPL-licensed code in their proprietary closed-source platform. So they were breaking the one unbreakable rule. Anya believed in process. She believed in polite, professional communication. She drafted an email to OmniCorp's general legal counsel address, the kind of email she had written 100 times to fix a bug or clarify documentation. Subject, GPLv3 License Compliance Inquiry, Aether Platform to whom it may concern. I am a software engineer and the author of a JavaScript library named I assume this is an oversight, and am writing to request that you bring your platform into compliance. Please let me know how you plan to proceed. Sincerely, Anya Sharma. The response, which came 3 days later, was a boilerplate dismissal. Dear MS. Sharma, thank you for your inquiry. OmniCorp takes intellectual property rights very seriously. We have reviewed your claim and found no evidence of infringement. Our proprietary code is developed in-house by our world-class engineering teams. Sincerely, OmniCorp Legal Department. Anya's jaw tightened. They hadn't even looked. She replied, this time including a detailed technical breakdown, showing the precise lines of their obfuscated code and how they corresponded directly to her original work. She attached a link to the public repository with its timestamped history of her commits. The evidence was irrefutable. This time, the silence was longer. 2 weeks passed. She sent a follow-up. Nothing. She found a contact for a low-level paralegal on LinkedIn and sent her a polite, persistent message. Finally, she got a new response. It was terse, dismissive, but it contained a single concession, an invitation to a meeting to clarify her position. Anya felt a flicker of relief. They were finally taking her seriously. This was all just a mistake, a breakdown in communication that a simple conversation could resolve. She naively imagined a room full of engineers, a technical discussion, and a mutual agreement to fix the problem. She had no idea she was a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse. The OmniCorp headquarters was not a building, it was a monument to wealth and power. A towering shard of glass and black steel that pierced the Seattle sky, it seemed to suck the very light out of the air around it. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and hushed reverence, the only sound the soft chime of elevators ascending to unseen heights. After signing a digital non-disclosure agreement that was thicker than most novels, Anya was given a visitor's badge and escorted to the 50th floor. The boardroom. The room was dominated by a single colossal table of polished obsidian, surrounded by 24 leather chairs. The far wall was a panoramic window offering a godlike view of the city below. 3 men were waiting for her. One was a young, sharp-faced man in a perfectly tailored suit who introduced himself as Marcus Vance, OmniCorp's head of legal. The other 2 were older executives whose expressions were set to a default of bored impatience. And then the door opened and Julian Thorne swept in. Thorne was exactly as he appeared in magazines and on conference stages, tall, impeccably dressed, with a mane of silver hair and a smile that radiated both charm and menace. He was the sun around which the entire OmniCorp system revolved. He didn't shake Anya's hand. MS. Sharma, Thorne began, his voice a smooth baritone that filled the room. We have your emails. You believe a piece of your hobby code is in our platform. Anya, feeling small in the cavernous room, clutched her tablet. Oh, Mr. Thorne, it's not a belief. I have proof. My async semaphore, JS library is being used in violation of its GPLv3 license. She started to bring up the technical evidence on her tablet, but Marcus Vance cut her off. MS. Sharma, our engineers have assured us that all code in the Aether platform is proprietary. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but the matter is closed. But it's not, Anya insisted, her voice trembling slightly. The condescension in the room was a physical weight. The license is legally binding. If you use the code, you have to release your source code. It's the entire point of copyleft. Julian Thorne leaned back in his chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He looked at the other executives, then back at Anya. And then he laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a deep, dismissive roar that echoed off the glass walls. The other men joined in, a chorus of derision. Release our source code, Thorne chuckled, wiping a theatrical tear from his eye. Our $10 billion platform, because of, what did you call it, async semaphore? Do you have any idea how absurd you sound? He leaned forward, his smile vanishing, replaced by a look of icy contempt. Let me be clear. We're a $100 billion company. You are a nobody. That line of code, even if it is yours, is a drop in our ocean. And you, MS. Sharma, are not even the drop. The humiliation was a physical blow. It stole the air from her lungs, sent a hot flush of shame up her neck. She had come here for a discussion armed with logic and facts. She was being met with raw, arrogant power. Now, Thorne said, standing up, the universal signal for get out. We have a company to run. Thank you for your time, Marcus Vance gestured toward the door. Anya, numb and shaking, gathered her things. Every eye in the room was on her, filled with a mixture of pity and scorn. She walked out of the boardroom, her face burning. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind her, sealing her out of their world. She rode the silent elevator down 50 floors, walked through the marble cathedral of the lobby, and stepped out into the cold, drizzling rain. The city felt different now, hostile. The OmniCorp tower loomed behind her like a giant, laughing monolith. They thought she was a nobody. They thought she would just crawl away defeated. As the rain soaked her jacket, the shame that had consumed her began to cool, to harden. It recrystallized into something else entirely. A diamond-hard core of resolve. She stopped on the sidewalk, oblivious to the pedestrians flowing around her. The fear was still there, a tremor deep inside, but the self-doubt, the lifetime of feeling overlooked, was being burned away by a clean, white-hot fury. They had laughed at her. They had called her a nobody. They were about to find out how much trouble a nobody could cause. She pulled out her phone, her fingers tapping on the wet screen. She wasn't searching for a bug report forum or a technical blog. She was searching for a lawyer. Finding a lawyer willing to sue OmniCorp was like trying to find a unicorn. The first 4 firms she contacted gave her a polite but firm no. 2 didn't even call her back. The name OmniCorp was a shield, a magic word that made law offices suddenly very, very busy. They had OmniCorp on retainer. They had a conflict of interest. They felt the case lacked merit. The excuses were varied, but the message was the same. This was a fight no one wanted. Dejected, she vented her frustration in an email to an old college professor, Dr. Albright, the one who had first ignited her passion for ethical software design. He responded within the hour. Anya, this is a fool's errand. You're going up against a dragon. But if you insist on being foolish, there's only one dragon slayer I know who might be crazy enough to help. His name is Ben Carter. He's semi-retired, cantankerous, and hates corporate bullies more than anyone I've ever met. Don't expect him to be pleasant, but expect him to be brilliant. I'll make an introduction. Ben Carter's office was the antithesis of OmniCorp. It was a dusty, book-lined room above a Vietnamese restaurant in the International District. The air smelled of old paper and pho. Ben himself looked like a disheveled owl, with a shock of white hair, thick glasses, and a cardigan that had seen better decades. He was hunched over a thick legal tome when Anya walked in. He listened to her story without interruption, his eyes narrowed, his fingers steepled. Anya by now had her pitch down to a science. She laid out the code, the license, the timeline of her communication with OmniCorp, and the final, humiliating meeting in the boardroom. When she finished, the room was silent, save for the clatter of dishes from the restaurant below. They laughed at you, Ben said. It wasn't a question. Yes, and Thorne called you a nobody. Yes, Ben leaned back in his creaking leather chair. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Good, he said finally. Arrogance makes people sloppy. And Julian Thorne is the most arrogant son of a bitch in this city. He looked at Anya, his gaze sharp and appraising. This isn't about money for you, is it? No, Anya said immediately. It's about the license. They broke the rule. The one rule that holds the whole open source community together. The principle of the thing, Ben mused. Principle is expensive, kid. They will bury us in paperwork. They will try to bankrupt you. They will drag your name through the mud until you look like a greedy, opportunistic patent troll. Are you ready for that? Anya thought of Thorne's laughing face. She thought of being called a nobody. Yes, she said, her voice firm. I am. Ben Carter smiled for the first time. It was a thin, predatory smile. All right then, MS. Jarma. Let's go slay a dragon. Filing the lawsuit felt like firing a cannon into the side of a mountain. For a week, nothing happened. Then the mountain fired back. The first salvo was a motion to dismiss, a 200-page document from OmniCorp's legal team led by Marcus Vance. It was a masterpiece of legal obfuscation, arguing that Anya's claim was frivolous, that a software license wasn't a binding contract, and that her code was too trivial to warrant copyright protection. Standard procedure, Ben grumbled, tossing the thick document onto his desk. He's trying to intimidate us. To show us they can generate more paper in a day than we can read in a month. The next salvo was public. A well-placed article appeared in a major tech journal, titled The Rise of the Open Source Troll. It didn't name Anya, but it described a growing trend of developers using obscure open-source licenses to shake down large tech companies. The article quoted an anonymous source from a major tech corporation who sounded suspiciously like Marcus Vance. Then came the online attacks. On developer forums and social media, anonymous accounts began to pop up, discrediting Anya's work. Her async semaphore, JS, was called amateurish, buggy, a student project. They claimed she was a grifter, motivated by greed, trying to ruin a beloved company out of jealousy. The attacks stung more than Anya expected. These were her communities, her people. To see them turn on her, even if it was just a vocal minority amplified by corporate sock puppets, felt like a betrayal. She found herself obsessively reading the comments, the poison seeping into her mind, resurrecting the very imposter syndrome she was fighting to overcome. "Stop reading that garbage," Ben ordered her during one of their meetings. "It's designed to get in your head. To make you quit. Don't give them the satisfaction. Focus on the work. Focus on the code," she tried. She poured her energy into helping Ben prepare their response to the motion to dismiss. She spent her nights documenting every instance of her code's use, building an unassailable mountain of evidence. But the isolation was beginning to wear her down. One evening, seeking a respite from the legal battle, she attended a panel discussion at the University of Washington titled Digital Ethics in the Age of AI. The panelists were academics and industry thinkers, and the discussion was a refreshing change from the adversarial world she now inhabited. One panelist in particular captivated her. Dr. Elena Flores, a professor of digital ethics, spoke with a fiery passion and a sharp, incisive wit. She argued that code was never neutral, that it was always embedded with the values and biases of its creators. "We are building the architecture of our future," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We have a moral responsibility to ensure that architecture is open, equitable, and just not a series of proprietary walled gardens designed to extract value and control." It was as if Elena was articulating the very core of Anya's own beliefs, but with a clarity and confidence Anya had never possessed. After the panel, Anya found herself approaching the professor. "Dr. Flores," she began, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to say what you said about walled gardens that really resonated with me." Elena smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made Anya feel instantly at ease. "Thank you. It's a fight worth fighting." "Are you a developer?" "I am," Anya said. And for the first time, she told the whole story to a complete stranger. She spoke of her code, the license, the boardroom, the lawsuit. She expected skepticism or perhaps polite disinterest. Instead, Elena listened with an intense, focused empathy. "That's not just a license violation," Elena said when Anya had finished. "That's a profound ethical breach. They're not just stealing your code, they're undermining the very foundation of collaborative innovation." Her eyes flashed with anger on Anya's behalf. "What you're doing is incredibly brave." No one had called her brave before. They had called her foolish, opportunistic, or naive. Hearing that word from this brilliant, passionate woman felt like a shield being raised against the onslaught of criticism. They exchanged email addresses, and that first conversation blossomed into another, over coffee, and then another over dinner. Elena provided a perspective Ben could. He saw the legal battle, the strategy, the moves and countermoves. Elena saw the human story, the ethical crusade. She helped Anya frame her fight not as a personal grievance, but as a stand for a more just digital world. Their relationship became Anya's anchor in the storm, a safe harbor where she could be vulnerable, where her doubts were met not with judgment but with understanding. For the first time since the lawsuit began, she didn't feel entirely alone. The legal battle dragged on. Ben, with Anya's technical help, successfully argued against the motion to dismiss. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Sarah Ryland, agreed that Anya's case had sufficient merit to proceed. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. The case was moving forward. Ben decided it was time to go on the offensive. "We need to shake them up," he declared, pacing his office. "We're going to file for a preliminary injunction. We'll ask the court to force OmniCorp to halt all sales and distribution of the Aether platform until they are in compliance with the license." Anya's eyes went wide. "Can we do that?" "It's a long shot," Ben admitted. A very long shot. The court rarely grants injunctions that could cause this much economic disruption. But filing it will force them to take us seriously. It will show them we're not just looking for a settlement. We're here to win. The hearing for the injunction was a new level of warfare. The courtroom was packed with journalists and OmniCorp lawyers in expensive suits. Marcus Vance was in his element. He didn't argue the facts of the code, he argued the consequences of the injunction. He brought in experts who testified that halting Aether would cripple thousands of businesses that relied on it. He spoke of jobs lost, of economic chaos. He painted a picture of Anya as a reckless saboteur, willing to burn down the entire tech ecosystem to satisfy a personal vendetta. The balance of hardships, Vance concluded, his voice resonating with manufactured gravity, weighs overwhelmingly in favor of OmniCorp and the millions of customers who depend on their services. To grant this injunction based on the plaintiff's dubious claim over 30 lines of code would be an act of profound judicial overreach. When Ben made his argument, focusing on the irreparable harm to the open-source community and the principle of copyright law, Judge Ryland seemed unmoved. She looked at the economic impact charts Vance had presented, her brow furrowed with concern. The ruling came 2 days later. Judge Ryland denied the injunction. Her written opinion was a body blow. While she acknowledged the plausibility of Anya's copyright claim, she agreed with OmniCorp that the potential economic devastation of an injunction was too great a risk. The media reported it as a decisive victory for OmniCorp. The narrative was set, the quirky coder's stunt had failed. The giant had swatted the fly. Anya sat in Ben's office, the printed ruling on the table between them, feeling the full weight of her defeat. All the doubt, all the fear she had been holding at bay came rushing back in. Maybe they're right, she whispered, her voice hollow. Maybe this is crazy. What am I even doing? Ben let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his expression hard. You're losing a battle. That doesn't mean you've lost the war. This is what they do. They use their size and their money to make you feel small, to make you feel hopeless. They want you to quit. Are you going to let them win? Anya looked up, meeting his fierce gaze. The memory of Thorne's laugh echoed in her ears. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Good, Ben said, a hint of a smile returning to his face. Because the injunction was just for show. Now the real fun begins. The case moves to discovery. And they're going to have to open their books and their servers to us. Let's see what's hiding in OmniCorp's closets. The discovery process was a digital deluge. OmniCorp, legally compelled to share relevant documents, sent over terabytes of data, internal emails, project management tickets, and most importantly, access to their source code repositories. It was a classic corporate tactic, hide a needle in a continent of haystacks. Most of the documents were heavily redacted, with huge black bars obscuring entire paragraphs, and the code was a labyrinth of millions upon millions of lines. For weeks, Anya and Ben waded through the data. Ben focused on the emails, looking for any mention of a sync semaphore, JS, or open-source compliance policies. Anya took on the code. She lived on coffee and takeout, her eyes burning from staring at the screen for 16 hours a day. She was searching for her own code, of course, but also for something more. A pattern. A hint that this wasn't an isolated mistake. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. She was tracing the history of a seemingly unrelated module in the Aether platform, a data compression utility. Deep in the commit history from 2 years prior, she found a comment, left by a programmer and obviously missed by the redacting team. Using the zlib compression library here. License is permissive, but make sure legal scrubs it before release. We don't need another GPL headache. Anya's heart started to pound. Another GPL headache, the comment was a digital breadcrumb. The programmer's username was K-Cha. Anya cross-referenced the name with LinkedIn and found a Kevin Choi, a former senior engineer at OmniCorp who had left the company 6 months ago. But the comment also gave her a new search parameter, the word scrub. She ran a search for it across the entire dataset. Most of the results were innocuous. But one was not. It was a link to an internal wiki page, a page that should have been restricted but through some fluke of misconfigured permissions was accessible. The title of the page was Open Source Ingestion Protocol. It was the smoking gun. A step-by-step guide for OmniCorp engineers on how to find and integrate open-source code into their projects. It detailed a systematic process for removing licenses, stripping author attributions, and obfuscating the code to make it look proprietary. It was a corporate policy for theft. The document listed dozens of open-source projects that had been ingested, complete with links to their public repositories. It was a graveyard of stolen work. And at the bottom of the page, under the heading Policy Approved By, was a single name, Julian Thorne. Anya felt a surge of adrenaline so intense it made her dizzy. This changed everything. This wasn't just about her 30 lines of code anymore. This was a vast, deliberate, and criminal conspiracy. She immediately called Ben, waking him up. He listened in stunned silence as she explained what she had found. "Don't touch anything," he said, his voice urgent. "Document it. A screenshot. A printout. Save the raw data to a secure offline drive." Now, as they prepared to use this bombshell evidence, a new, colder fear began to creep in. 2 days after her discovery, Anya came home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, things were subtly out of place. Nothing was stolen, not her TV, not the cash on her dresser. The only thing missing was the laptop from her desk. She had backups, of course. Multiple encrypted off-site backups. The thief hadn't taken her data, but they had sent a message: "We know what you're doing. We can get to you." A few days later, a man in a nondescript sedan was parked across the street from her building. He was there in the morning, and he was there when she got home. He never got out of the car. He just watched. OmniCorp was no longer fighting a lawsuit. They were fighting her. The intimidation was no longer legal, it was physical. Anya sat in her living room, the curtains drawn, the deadbolt on her door, feeling woefully inadequate. She looked at the evidence spread across her coffee table, the proof of OmniCorp's corruption. The game had changed. The stakes were no longer just her reputation or her principles. They were now her life. She looked at the phone, her hand hovering over it. She could call Ben and tell him it was too much, that she was dropping the case. But then she thought of Thorne's laugh, of the systemic theft, of the countless other nobodies whose work had been stolen. Her fear was real, but her resolve was harder. She picked up the phone and called Alina. "I need to see you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And then I need to call Ben. I know how we're going to win this." The discovery of OmniCorp's open-source ingestion protocol was like injecting adrenaline directly into the heart of their lawsuit. The fear from the break-in was real, a cold stone in Anya's stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, clarifying anger. Ben, for his part, was practically giddy. "This is it, kid," he said, pacing his dusty office, a printout of the protocol in his hand. "This is the ballgame. They weren't just negligent, they were malicious. This is conspiracy. This is racketeering. Julian Thorne's signature is on a policy for systematic copyright infringement." It's beautiful, their strategy shifted immediately. They had to protect their newfound leverage. First, they secured the evidence. Copies were made and placed in multiple secure locations, including a bank's safe deposit box. Next, they had to find Kevin Choi, the disgruntled engineer who had left the digital breadcrumb. Finding him wasn't hard. He was listed on LinkedIn as seeking new opportunities. Contacting him was another matter. Ben hired a private investigator, a discreet professional who made the first approach. Choi was, to put it mildly, terrified. The NDA he had signed with OmniCorp was ironclad and draconian. Violating it would mean financial ruin. But he had also left the company because he was disgusted with its ethics, with the very protocol Anya had discovered. Their first meeting took place in a noisy diner halfway between Seattle and Tacoma, a neutral ground of vinyl booths and weak coffee. Kevin Choi was a nervous man in his 40s, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he said, his voice a low whisper. "They will ruin you." "They will ruin me, they're already trying to," Anya said quietly. "They broke into my apartment," that got his attention. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a corporate raider but a fellow engineer who had been wronged. "The ingestion protocol," Thorne called it, "competitive advantage," Kevin said, bitterness lacing his words. "And it started small. A library here, a utility there. But then Aether got greenlit and the pressure was immense. The timelines were impossible. So Thorne and the VPs made it official policy. Find the best open source tools, scrub them, and integrate them. Anyone who questioned it was pushed out. That's why I left, Ben laid it out for him. We can subpoena you, Kevin. We can force you to testify. But if you come forward voluntarily as a whistleblower, you'll have legal protections. We can protect you. Help us make this right. Kevin stared into his coffee cup for a long time. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting Anya's. Okay, he said, his voice barely audible. I'll do it. With their star witness secured, and immediately put in touch with a whistleblower protection lawyer Ben recommended, they filed a motion to introduce the new evidence. The reaction from OmniCorp's legal team was apoplectic. Marcus Vance filed half a dozen emergency motions to have the evidence ruled inadmissible, claiming it was stolen, irrelevant to the case at hand, and a violation of corporate privacy. The battle moved from paper to the courtroom in a series of heated pretrial hearings. Marcus Vance was slick and formidable, arguing that Anya's team had engaged in a digital phishing expedition that went beyond the scope of discovery. Your Honor, Vance argued before Judge Ryland, the plaintiff's case concerns one 30-line piece of code. This supposed protocol is a desperate attempt to muddy the waters, to turn a simple copyright dispute into a public witch hunt against a respected American company. Ben Carter, looking more like a rumpled history professor than a high-powered lawyer, was Vance's polar opposite. He was calm, methodical, and devastating. With all due respect, Your Honor, Ben said, his voice quiet but firm, Mr. Vance is asking you to believe that a house fire is irrelevant to an arson investigation. This document doesn't muddy the waters, it clarifies them. It shows that the infringement on my client's copyright was not an accident. It was the result of a deliberate, calculated corporate policy, approved at the highest level. It speaks directly to motive, to intent, and to the scope of the damages. Judge Ryland, who valued logic over theatrics, sided with Ben. She ruled the evidence admissible. It was a staggering blow to OmniCorp. The fortress wall had been breached. The trial date was set. The months leading up to the trial were a blur of intense preparation. Anya's life was now entirely consumed by the case. She worked side by side with Ben, her technical expertise proving invaluable. She could explain the nuances of copyright law as it applied to software better than any legal scholar because she had lived it. She helped Ben craft questions for expert witnesses and, most importantly, for Kevin Choi. She learned to think like a lawyer, to see the case not as a sequence of code but as a narrative. Her relationship with Alina was her lifeline. Alina was her sounding board, her confidant, and her fiercest defender. When the stress became overwhelming, Alina would pull her away from the legal documents and code repositories, taking her for long walks along the waterfront or to quiet, dimly lit restaurants where they could talk about anything but the trial. You've changed, Alina said one evening as they watched the ferries glide across Puget Sound. When I first met you, you were so quiet, almost apologetic. I was, Anya admitted. I spent my whole life feeling like I needed to apologize for taking up space. Not anymore, Alina said, taking her hand. Now you're taking up the space you deserve. You found your voice, Anya realized it was true. The timid coder who had walked into that boardroom was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth and was not afraid to fight for it. The trial was no longer just about vindicating her code, it was about validating her own existence. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was a media circus. Julian Thorne was there, sitting at the OmniCorp table next to Marcus Vance. He looked serene, untouchable, giving a small, confident smile to the courtroom sketch artists. He was there to project power, to show the world that this was nothing more than a minor annoyance. Anya, sitting next to Ben, felt a tremor of her old fear return. The weight of the moment, the sheer institutional power arrayed against her, was immense. Ben seemed to sense it. Breathe, kid, he whispered without looking at her. Just breathe. You know the facts. You know the truth. That's all that matters in here. The first few days of the trial were a dry, technical affair. Expert witnesses for both sides argued over the definition of derivative work and the nuances of copyright law. Marcus Vance tried to paint Anya's async semaphore, JS as trivial, a common solution that any competent programmer could have written. Ben's experts, however, meticulously demonstrated the unique elegance and specific structure of Anya's code, proving it was a creative work worthy of protection. Then it was Anya's turn to take the stand. As she walked to the witness box, she could feel Julian Thorne's eyes on her. It was the same dismissive, contemptuous gaze from the boardroom. But this time, she didn't shrink from it. She met his eyes, held them for a moment, and then turned to face Ben. Ben led her through her story. She explained how she wrote the code, why she chose the GPLv3 license, and how she discovered it in Aether. She spoke clearly, confidently, translating complex technical concepts into simple, understandable terms for the jury. She was no longer just a coder, she was a teacher. Then came the cross-examination. Marcus Vance approached her with a predatory grace. His strategy was clear: to portray her as a liar and an opportunist. "Odemes. Sharma," he began, his voice dripping with skepticism, "isn't it true that you never made any significant income from this so-called brilliant piece of code before you decided to sue one of the world's most successful companies?" "It's open source," Anya replied calmly. "The goal isn't income. The goal is to share knowledge and build better technology for everyone." "A noble sentiment," Vance sneered. "Or a convenient excuse for a failed project you're now trying to cash in on." He hammered at her for hours, twisting her words, questioning her motives, trying to rattle her. But Anya held firm. She refused to be baited. She answered every question with facts, her voice never wavering. She remembered Alina's words: she deserved to take up this space. She had earned it. When Vance finally finished, visibly frustrated by his inability to crack her composure, she walked back to her seat, her head held high. She had survived. The climax of the trial came the next day. Ben Carter stood and called his next witness. The plaintiff calls Kevin Choi to the stand. A ripple of confusion went through the OmniCorp legal team. The name was not on their list of expected witnesses. As Kevin Choi, looking pale and nervous, walked to the stand, Anya saw a flicker of genuine alarm on Julian Thorne's face for the first time. Ben handled his witness with masterful care, first establishing his credentials and long tenure at OmniCorp. Then he led him to the heart of the matter. "Oh, Mr. Choi," Ben said, "while you were employed at OmniCorp, was there a formal policy regarding the use of open-source software?" "Yes," Kevin said, his voice shaky but clear. "And what was that policy?" Marcus Vance was on his feet. "Objection, relevance. Overruled," Judge Ryland said, her eyes fixed on the witness. "He may answer. We were encouraged, instructed to find and integrate open source code," Kevin said. "And two, to remove its licensing and attribution." The courtroom was dead silent. The jurors leaned forward. "Was this policy written down anywhere?" Ben asked. "Oh, yes. It was on the internal company wiki. It was called the Open Source Ingestion Protocol." Ben placed a copy of the printed-out protocol on the evidence projector. The words filled the screens around the courtroom. "Is this the protocol you are referring to, Mr. Choi?" "Yes," Kevin whispered. "And who approved this protocol? Whose name was at the bottom of that document?" Kevin took a deep breath. He glanced at Julian Thorne, who was now staring at him with undisguised fury. "The policy was approved by the CEO," Kevin said, his voice growing stronger. "It was approved by Julian Thorne." Pandemonium erupted. The journalists in the back were scribbling furiously. Marcus Vance looked as if he had been punched in the stomach. But Ben wasn't finished. He projected the internal emails Kevin had provided, emails in which Julian Thorne himself praised his teams for their aggressive integration of external assets and for accelerating the Aether timeline. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and it all pointed to one man. The cross-examination was a desperate, futile attack. Vance tried to paint Choi as a disgruntled employee with a personal vendetta, but Kevin's testimony, backed by the irrefutable documentary evidence, was unbreakable. When Kevin Choi stepped down from the stand, the trial was effectively over. Everyone in the room knew it. Julian Thorne's mask of serene confidence had shattered, replaced by a ghastly, pale fury. He had been beaten not by a team of high-priced lawyers, but by a quiet coder and a disgruntled engineer who had decided to tell the truth. Anya looked at the jury, at their faces, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe that she was going to win. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. The speed was a good omen, Ben had told her, a sign of a clear-cut decision. Still, the wait was agonizing. Anya sat with Ben and Alina in a small conference room, the silence thick with anticipation. She stared out the window at the cityscape, the OmniCorp tower conspicuously absent from her view. It felt like a different city now, a different world than the one she had inhabited just a few months ago. The call came. The jury had reached a verdict. They filed back into the courtroom, the air crackling with tension. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't look at Julian Thorne. She looked at the 7 faces in the jury box, trying to read their expressions. They remained impassive. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with a stern face, handed a piece of paper to the clerk. The clerk handed it to Judge Ryland, who reviewed it without a flicker of emotion. In the matter of Sharma versus OmniCorp, the judge began, her voice cutting through the silence, on the charge of copyright infringement, we the jury find for the plaintiff, Anya Sharma. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Anya felt Alina's hand squeeze hers hard. Ben let out a long, slow breath and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel, the court finds that OmniCorp's infringement was not only willful but malicious, conducted as a matter of official corporate policy. Therefore, in addition to statutory damages, the court orders OmniCorp to fulfill its obligation under the terms of the GNU General Public License, version 3. OmniCorp is hereby ordered to make the complete and corresponding source code for its Aether platform publicly available within 90 days. This time, the sound was a roar. Journalists bolted for the doors. Marcus Vance slumped in his chair, his face ashen. Julian Thorne sat bolt upright, his face a mask of incandescent rage. He had not just lost, he had been humiliated. The core of his empire, his proprietary $10 billion secret, had been ordered to be given away for free. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The verdict was a cataclysm for OmniCorp. The next morning, its stock price nosedived by 40%, wiping out billions in value. The board of directors, facing a massive shareholder revolt, convened an emergency meeting. Before the day was out, Julian Thorne had been forced to resign as CEO. The story of his hubris and downfall was plastered across every news outlet in the world. Anya found herself at the center of a media firestorm. Reporters camped outside her apartment building. She was hailed as a hero, a giant slayer, the patron saint of open-source developers. The adulation was overwhelming and frankly uncomfortable. She gave one brief statement on the courthouse steps, Ben at her side. This was never about money, she said, her voice clear and steady, amplified by a dozen microphones. It was about a promise. The promise of the open-source community is that we all build on each other's work, openly and freely. That promise is protected by licenses, and those licenses must be respected. That's all we asked for. I'm just grateful the court agreed. Then she slipped away from the chaos with Ben and Alina. There was no wild party, no champagne celebration. They went to the quiet Vietnamese restaurant below Ben's office. Over bowls of steaming pho, they sat in a comfortable, exhausted silence. You did it, kid, Ben said finally, raising his water glass. You slayed the dragon. We did it, Anya corrected him, clinking her glass against his. The victory was profound, but the cost had been real. The stress, the fear, the public attacks, they had left their marks. But looking across the table at Ben's triumphant, tired grin and Alina's proud, loving smile, Anya knew it had all been worth it. She had not only won a lawsuit, she had reclaimed a part of herself she didn't even know was missing. In the months that followed, the world settled into a new normal. OmniCorp, under new leadership, complied with the court's order. The source code for the Aether platform was released to the public. And a funny thing happened. The community didn't just mock it, they embraced it. Developers from around the world began to fork the code, fix its bugs, improve its features, and build upon it in ways OmniCorp's cloistered engineers never could have imagined. The platform, freed from its corporate prison, began to truly flourish. Anya wanted no part of that. She had a different plan. Using a significant portion of the financial settlement from the lawsuit, a sum she had never asked for but was now determined to use for good, she established a new nonprofit foundation. She called it the Open Source Defense Fund, a legal aid society dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation, free of charge, to independent developers and small projects in disputes with large corporations. Ben Carter, coaxed out of his semi-retirement for good, agreed to serve as its chief counsel. Her life was no longer about the quiet solitude of code. It was about advocacy. She gave talks at conferences not as a technical expert but as a leader. She told her story, and in doing so, inspired a new generation of developers to understand the power and the importance of the licenses they used. She was no longer a nobody. She was a symbol. One evening, a year after the verdict, Anya was sitting in the new, brightly lit offices of the OSDF, her feet propped up on her desk. Her relationship with Alina was the steady, joyful center of her new life. They had built a home together, a place of peace and partnership. Anya was looking at her email, not at a bug report but at a message from a young developer in Brazil. He had used their foundation's resources to successfully fight a copyright claim from a local tech company that had stolen his mobile app's code. "I read about your story," he wrote. "It gave me the courage to fight. Thank you for showing us that one person can make a difference." Anya leaned back in her chair and smiled. The imposter syndrome, the fear of not being enough, was a distant ghost. She had faced down a titan and in doing so had discovered her own strength. She hadn't become a ruthless corporate player or a billionaire CEO. She had won by holding fast to her principles, by forcing a world built on power and greed to recognize the value of community and collaboration. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the lights of the city. She knew her single line of code was still out there, humming away inside thousands of new projects, a quiet testament to the idea that something small, elegant, and freely given could, in the end, be more powerful than the largest corporation in the world. And she, Anya Sharma, was no longer just its author. She was its guardian.